Hey guys, it's Angelo, and as we're getting closer and closer to the Shadowlands release, and balancing changes draw closer to completion, today we'll be ranking your Covenant choices for the Discipline Priest and which ones to pick when going into World of Warcraft Shadowlands. Keep in mind that everything you are about to see is still on the beta and is therefore subject to change, even if some choices are just so superior honestly that the chances of changes altering this ranking are, in my opinion, incredibly slim, but the chance of course is still given. Should anything change, I will of course update you guys and make a new ranking in the upcoming weeks or months close to release. Now, the Discipline Priest is currently an insanely strong healer on the Shadowlands beta, so strong in fact that I almost would certainly say that the spec itself will possibly see some nerfs in the upcoming weeks. But again, this should in no way change which Covenant is still the strongest for the spec. If you wish to stay updated on anything Priest or World of Warcraft related, or even on my interface, then be sure to join the Discord server with the link in the description box below, and if you haven't already, then feel free to subscribe. Alright, now without any further ado, let's go right ahead and have a look. Okay, so I will actually structure this video like a typical ranking video, starting from the worst possible option to the best one. Where the best options are kind of easy to pick, the lower spectrum of our Covenant choices make it slightly more difficult because, well, 2 of the 4 Covenants are similar in their usefulness, which honestly isn't really that high. When ranking the Covenants for PvE content, we need to take many things into consideration. Rating, Mythic Plus, and of course everyday PvE open world content and the environment. When taking all of these things into consideration, our ranking doesn't really change that much because fortunately for us, especially the lower ranked Covenant options are clear losers in almost every scenario. Accordingly, coming in at the last spot currently, I will rank the Night Fae. Now don't get me wrong, the Night Fae are not intrinsically weaker than the upcoming Covenant which is on rank 3 in this ranking, but the Night Fae simply lack the output which all other Covenant options currently grant us in form of the class ability, and also have the arguably weakest Covenant ability. On screen now is the actual Night Fae class ability, Fae Guardians, and as you'll be able to tell, it's a very nice utility spell in order to support an entire raid group or even a Mythic Plus group. However, its lack of competitive throughput benefits simply don't justify using Fae Guardians in comparison to any other option. The mana regeneration of the Wrathful Fairy had been nerfed recently, and on top of that, has an added internal cooldown attached to it, which limits its potential mana regeneration greatly. It's also counterproductive to constantly be shadow mending in order to get your Benevolent Fairy to reduce the cooldown of your major abilities, not only because you want to constantly be shadow mending yourself in order to reduce your cooldown, but taking away very important global cooldowns you need to be using doing something else is of course a huge problem. But it also puts a complete halt to your entire rotation by doing all of this every 1.5 minutes, effectively trying to force you to do something you should not be doing most of the time. Some of the soul options, or rather soulbind options of the Night Fae are pretty solid, but again, this doesn't change or push the Night Fae choice up to the strength and sheer potency of the other Covenants for us as Discipline Priests. It's honestly a shame because the Night Fae are very neat aesthetically speaking and have a very nice storyline attached to them. And some good open world content as well, but unfortunately, when it comes to any form of competitive play, are currently not your go-to choice. Next up on our list will be the Necrolords, coming in at number 3. The Necrolords class ability, Unholy Nova, has seen some nerfs recently, and these nerfs have pushed it down the list when it comes to its potency. Where Unholy Nova used to be very strong, especially so on Mythic Plus, and provided a lot of healing for our allies as well as a decent amount of damage, it's now only truly effective on very large packs of enemies, and only if these live for the entire duration of Unholy Transfusion. Both are factors which are not always given. Now in single target, other options are of course much stronger, needless to say, which in and of itself already diminishes the strength of Unholy Nova even more so in a raiding environment then. The truth is, that it too just gets outshined by other options in every form of gameplay, very similar to the Night Fae, and in the environment in which it was clearly intended to be strong, which is Mythic Plus, it just fails to add anything impactful to our gameplay or rotation, and also fails to deliver strong output in any way, shape, or form. Unholy Nova's biggest downside, of course, is its range. With a 15-yard range, you have to position yourself in melee range every 1 minute in order to use it, which is of course not where you as a Discipline Priest will want to be standing ideally. This also forces movement upon you if you wish to use Unholy Nova, which of course are valuable seconds that you could have been using casting your actual spells, ramping up, or just positioning yourself far away from an upcoming mechanic, basically just doing anything else. What makes Unholy Nova better than the Fey Guardians though is the sheer fact that it does not negatively impact your rotation or force you to cast spells you wouldn't want to be casting in any given situation. This makes Unholy Nova less of a burden and more of a, well, just a bad spell to use basically, which is why it's placed on number 3 on this list rather than number 4. Next up on this list we have the Venthyr, who are coming in at number 2. The Venthyr's Covenant class ability, Mind Games, is a very strong single target ability and effectively replaces one smite in your rotation every 45 seconds, providing a solid amount of healing to the group as well as damage, a combination that any good Discipline Priest will of course value. Mind Games has the big advantage that it's on a relatively short cooldown, especially compared to the other Covenant class abilities, and is incredibly easy to use at the end of the day. There's no ramp up required, no gameplay altering aspects involved, all you essentially do is keep it on cooldown. This makes Mind Games a good solution to go with when all things are considered, both rating and Mythic Plus. Now currently, Mind Games is being carried by the fact that its actual damage output as well as healing are very strong, but due to its relatively simple mechanics and use, this means that should the numbers on this ability be nerfed, Mind Games may very well see itself falling lower on this list. Whether or not that will end up being the case of course remains to be seen, but as of now, Mind Games comes in at a close second. If you want an easy to use Covenant class ability with effectively no downsides and with no way to make mistakes with it while it's still having a very plausible spell for every scenario, then well, the Venthyr will most certainly be the Covenant for you. The Venthyr also offers some pretty decent soul binds for the Discipline Priest with percentual damage buffs, haste, and other things which are very great to have for an offensive healer such as the Disc. The Soul Binds, as well as Mind Games, also synergize well with Shadow Covenant, which only allows the use of shadow spells during its duration. This brings us to the number 1 on this list though, which is vastly different from Mind Games in of course all aspects. Finally, at number 1 we have the Kyrians and the Boon of the Ascended. There are a few reasons why the Kyrians are the best Covenant choice for the Discipline Priest. To put it simply, Boon of the Ascended is an incredibly versatile spell and can be used by itself to deal a load of damage both single target and AoE, or can be paired with your ramp up, specifically with Evangelism, to amount to absolutely insane levels of healing output. Boon of the Ascended is on a 3-minute cooldown, meaning it will be ready every other Evangelism ramp, and when played correctly, will single-handedly heal an entire raid group up. The key here though is the fact that the Boon of the Ascended takes some mental preparation every time you use it, takes practice, and even skill to pull off properly, which I'm sure is something many Discipline Priests will actually value. Boon of the Ascended will take some time getting used to because it forces us in melee range to gain the highest potential amount of damage and healing and the highest boon stacks, which is easily its biggest drawback, yet it allows every one of your global cooldowns invested not only to be very impactful, but also to feel very rewarding because each Ascended Nova cast or Ascended Blast counts towards your Boon of the Ascended at the end. The synergy this brings along with your entire ramp up and how it perfectly aligns with every second Evangelism while dealing a ton of damage in Mythic Plus are all just factors which make the Kyrian Covenant your go-to choice in all situations, as long as you're willing to learn how Boon of the Ascended works and given you know the ins and outs of the Discipline Priest itself or are willing to learn them. From a gameplay and fun perspective, the Kyrians win as well, because the Boon of the Ascended is highly gameplay altering in a positive way, much more so than any other Covenant ability. Again, its biggest drawback is the melee range requirement for Ascended Nova, and arguably its skill or competence requirement. The latter can easily be fixed by you taking a bit of time and learning it, while the former is kind of annoying, but in comparison to the healing throughput you can achieve, a very minor issue. Boon of the Ascended also leaves some room for decision making in order to maximize its effect. Sacrificing going into melee range will reduce its output, but gives you safe positioning instead. If you risk going into melee range to make use of the Ascended Nova in order to stack the boon as high as possible, you will be rewarded with a crazy amount of damage and healing once the boon explodes. Okay, and that concludes our ranking. Ultimately, the Kyrians are the best choice to pick at the moment in my opinion, with the Venthyr coming in at a very close second. If you're not overly serious about being too competitive, then the Venthyr are your go-to option in order to still feel and be quite competitive in most situations. If you want to maximize the output of your Discipline Priest in every possible way and are not afraid to be min-maxing, then the Kyrians are the most rewarding option for you in all types of gameplay. Be sure to let me know what you think. Any concerns or issues with this ranking? Well, be sure to let me know in the comments down below. I'd be very excited to read what you think. As always, thank you so much for watching, and if you're new to the channel, feel free to subscribe, and if this video was helpful for your decision of which Covenant to pick, be sure to leave a like. A special thanks as always to my supporters over on Patreon, you guys are awesome, and once more thank you to all of you for your support. Now, have a good one my friends, get excited for Shadowlands and for the Covenants, be very excited to play Discipline Priest, and I will see you all in the next one.